Characters. Who are they? What are they? Who will they become? So much goes into the creation of a character, their backstory, culture, beliefs, image, eye color, description, personalities, and so much more. As readers, we only get a glimpse of what truly goes into each character. So grab a beverage and get comfortable as we explore this episode's character in depth with your host, Madilynn Dale. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Character Driven. Today we've got a fun guest for you guys to meet and another amazing and fantastic character to chat about. But before I pull him in, if you haven't hit that subscribe button, why not? Go ahead and hit it. Get notifications when we go live. Go Indie Now has a ton of stuff going on every single week, every weekend, and we're only getting bigger. But without further ado, let me bring in our guest for this week. Hey, JD.
Hey, Maddie. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for coming on Character Driven.
I am super excited to be here.
Yes, I'm excited to have you and to talk about this character. So go ahead and tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about you and this story.
Sure. So my name is JD Ruffin, and I am a fantasy author. I write low magic epic fantasy, although in my newer series, it's getting more high magic. The series we're talking about is called The Kingdom War. And the character that we're going to talk about today, his name is Declan. In this entire 4-book series, my plan when I sat down to write the book was not for Declan to be one of the main characters. And near the end of book 1, I kind of fell in love with Declan, and he became the main character throughout the rest of the series. And I actually restructured a lot of stuff because of that. Because I don't know, I just love this character. I wish he was alive and could be my best friend. He's one of those characters that just turned into that. But he is one of 2 brothers in the story, and the story opens up with a kidnapping. So unusual for a fantasy to be kind of a crime mystery, but that's how this starts out. And Declan's brother, Keelan, is the investigator assigned to try and find the kidnapped victim and figure out what's going on there. And in the process of that investigation, he uncovers spies and an evil cult and people going to war. And like this, it turns into this whole thing that is just bigger than any one investigation. And it ends up roping in mages and all the stuff that we love in fantasies. But Declan becomes really critical because he is sent off to go find help in a very special, magical way. Nice. And we can get to that. I won't spoil that one yet.
Ooh. So what is his backstory? What led up to Declan putting into this position?
Yeah, so Declan, and so there's 2 parts to that, two real important parts to answer that question. The first is about Declan and Keelan and their family background. Mm-hmm. When Keelan was, I believe Keelan was 6, Declan was 3, maybe 8 and 3. I can't remember. Declan was 3. I remember that. They lost their parents, and they were taken in by this grandfatherly mage. Think Gandalf. I mean, he's like the grandfatherly mage everybody loves, that is the great magician kind of guy. That's the guy. So he took them in, and they actually grew up in the Mages Guild, surrounded by magicians and surrounded by the study of magic. And they were steeped in that. Ironically, Keelan, his magical gift, has nothing to do with like fireballs and cool stuff. He has the ability to tell whether you're lying to him or not, which is why he made a great investigator. And he went down that route. Declan, and this is the important part here, is ungifted. He doesn't have magic. And in this society, in this world, about 80% of people have a gift. and it's a real status symbol. Like they have a gold collar if they have a gift. And for Declan to grow up without one in the seat of magic for the whole world, it was a real, think about the layers of personality and what that would do to a kid growing up, being an outsider and ostracized and not having the gold collar and resenting it and all that stuff that goes into that.
Yeah.
That's what Declan grew up out of. And when we meet him in the book, he is a 19-year-old. He is a ranger, which is their, I think, Border Patrol meets park ranger kind of combo.
Yeah.
Stationed on the border of the nation that they end up going to war with. I hate to break that to you. And so that's not a spoiler. It's actually led up.
Yeah.
You tell the Kingdom War, of course they're going to war. But Declan, like, he's out there a loner, and he's trying to escape from the golden collars and from society. And it all makes sense when you know his personality and his backstory.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how we get to Declan in sort of present tense when you start the story.
Yeah.
And you do learn that backstory along the way. And there's some tension between the brothers because Keelan is this stud investigator that's on, in the newspapers and being praised by society and winning awards. And he's like looked up to. Mm-hmm. And Declan has always looked up to him. He's his big brother. But he also resents him very deeply for his success and for his magic and him being all the things Declan always wanted to be, but knew he would never be. And so that's the character that is Declan. And you can see, I guess I'm kind of a sucker for an underdog.
Yikes. So the whole thing with his brother then are there improvements that happen once the story gets going then?
Oh, absolutely. I gave you the starting point. I mean, that's the backstory, and that's how Declan kind of gets where he is as that 19-year-old. Mm-hmm. At the end, he's not really in book one until the very end. Declan isn't until the very end. It's mostly about Keelan and his investigation and kind of getting to that point. Mm-hmm. But at the end, when Declan comes into the picture, you get a glimpse into that tension and into the darkness within Declan.
Yeah.
And Atticus, who's the old mage, tries to be that grandfather, hand on the shoulder, guiding him, and he shrugs it off. And he's very much a rebellious 19-year-old, resentful, good guy, but just really has a chip on his shoulder. Yeah. As you get into book two, the story really shifts. And instead of it being 90% about Keelan and what's going on with him, it's really kind of 50-50. Ooh. And Declan goes off on a mission. He's sent on a mission to find magical aid. Ooh. Ironically, being the guy without magic, and he really resents that.
Yeah.
And on this journey, he meets a number of people who really help him kind of become who he's meant to be. And so the next three books are he goes from a minor arc to the major arc of character development. And you see his growth and you see who he becomes. And I love his story, and I'm emotionally invested in his story. And I think when readers get to know him, I hope you'll feel the same way.
Oh, so his journey, why did they pick somebody to go on the quest that does not have magical abilities? Does that make him acceptable to those he may come across?
That's a really good question. And I'm going to have to be careful how I answer that. Yeah. So Atticus sends him on the journey.
Yeah.
And the reason Atticus gives him for being sent is, I'm too old, I can't go. And Atticus is they're in the mountains at this point in the story. Mm-hmm. And Atticus is really struggling to get around on the mountains, and they're having to help him. And he just says, look, I can't do this. I can't make this journey. And this is a desperate situation. We need help. We're going to be invaded, and they outnumber us, and it's bad. So, and Keelan has got to continue on his quest for this kidnapped woman. He's got to keep the investigation going because they still haven't found her. at the end of the book. Sorry, that was a spoiler. And so Declan is he kind of positions it as, help me, Luke, you're my only hope, kind of that thing, with a hologram. And so Declan, like at that point, Declan doesn't think more of it than, okay, again, I'm the hand-me-down getting the hand-me-down errand.
Yeah.
Now that you learn that is not true, and there is a very special reason Declan goes. But I can't tell you that.
Yes, but that's a good enough answers if you ask me, because it definitely inspires everybody to go check it out and read it.
Yeah, and by the way, Declan's book, like when he really kind of becomes the guy, the book is called Ungifted because that's Declan. And it released on June 6th.
Nice.
So it is out, and the audio is also out now. So
yes.
Fun story there. And again, it's about my best friend. So you got to see that.
Yes. I am curious about the past, the loss of their parents. How does that influence them as they grow up?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, can you imagine being an 8-year-old child? I mean, Declan is really too young to remember his parents. Mm-hmm. He can remember, and there are a few scenes of this where he can remember sort of fuzzy images of his mother, but he can't even remember his dad at all.
Yeah.
And so he more feels a sort of a blank hole in his life that he can't really touch or identify because he never really knew what it was. Mm-hmm. Keelan is a completely different story. He knew them, and he doesn't know what happened to them, and he never finds out what happens to them in the first book. And so he has all of those sort of abandonment issues, and it fuels him. What you find when you meet Keelan and you really get to know him, he has this superhero complex where he has to protect everybody. So one of the reasons being a cop, in essence, is what he is the perfect profession for him, because in his childhood, when they were 8 and 3 in the Mages Guild, kind of the new kids, the outcasts, he takes on the role of protector for his brother, and so he really watches out for Keelan. I'm sorry, for Declan, sort of at the expense of his own happiness and being a kid. And that continues all the way through their teenage years until they go their separate ways, becoming adults and doing adult things.
Yeah.
And then that protective nature carries over into Keelan's life in everything he does. And that's born out of the loss of his parents and being driven to protect because of that.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
On the journey Declan takes, does he get close to anybody? Does he bring in a new, almost like a friend or anything?
So, yes. So Declan befriends on a fluke a baby owl.
Oh.
Which I know this is going to sound really Disney-esque, and sorry, props to Disney for that. This is not a Disney story, but there is this baby owl that just will not leave him alone and ends up hopping in his pack and traveling with him and becomes kind of that familiar role. She's more than an owl. She's more than just a little baby owl. So a little hint there, tease. Her name is Orla, which means golden princess in Gaelic, if that is any kind of a hint. So they become like really soulmate kind of bonded. So there's a special bond there. He also he meets a number of people while he's on the island, and becomes very, very close to one of them. And it kind of has a found family in the Islanders who really don't like him when he first shows up.
Yeah.
But they actually end up becoming, it's a very sad thing when he has to leave the island to go do the things he has to do.
Yeah.
He just like they love him and he loves them, and it's a family. So yes, Declan finds a lot of peace and a lot of connection that he never had.
That is amazing. And I am really curious to see how that interaction plays out and what happens between him and the owl. Because I can just, like, my brain is just taking that idea and running with it right now.
So Orla, okay, I will say this about Orla. If I have a second favorite character, it's Orla because
And they're together. Like,
yes,
these two characters are together. That's awesome.
And Orla is this. So when you first meet Orla, well, I can't say that. So
does she kind of make the other half of him, like she balances him out?
I don't know that I would say that. She has her own personality. And she is perky and a little smarty pants, and like she keeps his feet on the ground. Like that's her job. She's the humility patrol, and she's very funny in that way. So Orla was from a writer standpoint, she was my tool to inject humor into what can be very emotional and very deep and kind of serious when you've got these characters with these layers. And I wanted to balance that with, he has the ability to make fun of himself, and he gains that because she makes fun of him nonstop. Like it's like painful how much she makes fun of him, but it's funny. So I think you're gonna love Orla. She's a hoot. Sorry, bad pun.
It just kind of came out.
That's I didn't mean to do that. Sorry.
Yes. So with Declan's character, I don't think I've asked yet. Where did the inspiration for him come from?
Oh, you know what? I've tried to figure that out. So physically, Declan, I think you've got some pictures you're going to show later that I use. And again, these are not commercial art or anything. This is just what I use when I was writing to kind of draw inspiration and see the character as I'm writing. That helps me as a tool. So I had Declan pictured when he was 3, this little munchkin. He has this giant, like, puffy hair. And I think one of the scenes I describe it as this dandelion puff hair. And he's this little bitty boy with his giant hair, and he just is cute to me. So his personality kind of grew out of that. I don't know where the rest of him came from. I think a part of me is in every single character I write, good, bad, and ugly. I mean, even the antagonist who is evil. I mean, there's a part of me that is in her too. So I think I identify with Declan with a lot of, some of his layers.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, could I say like Steven Seagal is the guy that I model? No, I don't think there's that kind of direct correlation. I'm sorry, it's a really lousy answer.
No, this is actually really good. So I like it. Like you've put different layers into him, and it sounds like the inspiration has come from various different places, and it just kind of found its way there.
Well, and look, this is going to sound completely insane, but the times that I do my best writing are not when I'm trying to write. Mm-hmm. It's when I close my eyes, when I know the characters so well that they're real to me. Like that's first. But then because of that, I can just close my eyes and pretend I'm watching a movie. And the characters just act it out. And all I'm doing is taking dictation. I'm not writing. I'm just typing up what they're doing. So I think that happened with Declan. Like I got to know, I really kind of mapped him out as a person, and he became real to me. Mm-hmm. And his scenes just like poured out. Like they were just easy because I just felt like I was, writing down what my friend did.
Yeah. And that's amazing. So he's literally like moved in and camped out like, hey, this is my story. This is what's happening right now in my life. Put it down.
Oh yeah. He's popping a beer in the fridge and like, he's that guy. Totally.
Man. Yep. Do you have a particular scene that kind of stands out to you the most with him in it?
I mean, so he's really prominent over the last 3. I say the last 3. There's 4 books in the series. Over the last 3 books in the series, he's really prominent, especially in books 2 and 3. Mm-hmm. And I would say there's probably two scenes that come to mind, like most to mind, that I think that were most emotionally impactful when I did them. There is a scene where he has to go through a series of tests,
Mhm.
and he doesn't know that he's going through tests.
Ooh.
He thinks he's experiencing what's going on. And I mean, it is gut wrenching type tests to see if he can handle what needs to come next. And so I think that testing sequence was really, I rewrote that probably 10 times because I wanted it to really be right. I wanted to fit him.
Mhm.
And then the other scene, which happens much later in the story, um, he is back on the mainland. He's the island is where he goes to find help, and he goes to the mainland. And when he
Yeah.
gets back on the mainland, he comes to uh, a town and discovers that it has been just burned and gutted and pillaged, and he finds people dead, buried in the snow, and like it's a really sad scene.
Yeah.
And I got to play Declan kind of through his eyes doing that scene. And I think that is one of the most, I think that's the first scene. It's not the first. It's probably the scene in the series that I personally writing it teared up the most. I was moved writing that scene. So yeah, I would say those two. And there's a lot of really happy ones too. But I mean, from a pure sort of emotional, what had the most sway, it would be those two.
Yeah, and writing a scene like that, if it affects you as the writer, just imagine as the
Yeah.
reader, like, who. And scenes like that, that last one, that those are hard, especially
Oh
when
yeah.
you are in the moment, you're feeling it. Like you've got to feel what's happening to actually be able to portray it. So
That's right. If I don't feel it, I promise you won't. I need to feel it. I need to be emotionally invested. Otherwise, I know the reader's not going to. They're going to look at it and go, "Okay, yeah, whatever."
yeah,
And I don't want to break hearts or anything, but I want to crush them. Like I want to take your heart and just do like that
I
in a
mean,
very
it makes
nice,
it memorable.
in a
So
really nice, happy way.
yeah,
But no, I mean that kind of connection. I mean, you got to feel it.
mhm,
If you're not moved by it, what's the point?
for real. Oh man. So Declan goes through a lot then
Yeah.
from the start of the series to the finish. Um, I want to ask if he ever gets happiness, but I'm just going to pretend that he does, even if he doesn't, because I don't want
Okay.
spoilers for the end. um, but along the way, besides having to go through those challenges, is he, I mean, is there something you don't like about his character that bugged you as you were writing it, especially through those challenging scenes?
He can be a little whiny. Yeah, like I mean, you think about what he's been through and the chip on his shoulder and all that. I mean, sometimes you just want to look at him and go, "Dude, shut up." I mean, like you're good right now. You're fine. Just take
Yeah,
a breath. And the problem with that though is in real life, we all know people that have been through a lot of stuff, and sometimes we feel like we want to say that to them, but you can't because you got to help them. They've been through a lot of stuff, and so
yeah.
that like every time I wanted to do that, I could see Orla cocking her little head, going, "Don't you dare!" And like again, she's gonna check anybody. So I would say that would if there's anything that annoyed me about Declan, it would be that.
Oh,
And I will answer your happy question.
yes.
So Declan and Keelan do. I mean, they're brothers.
Yeah.
Brothers are like all siblings. They have their rough patches, but
Mhm.
they're brothers, and that blood is thicker than water, and they come together.
Yay.
And so there is. I will say he finds peace. Whether he finds happiness, I'll leave that up to you to decide.
Oh, that's a tricky one.
It's a
Man.
sneaky answer, isn't it?
That's one of those endings you're gonna be like, either the person's gonna absolutely like hate it, throw it at the wall, or be like, okay,
Oh
I'm
no,
okay
no, no!
with
You're going to
that.
end book 4 with warm fuzzy. Oh, that's going to be book 4, so
Yay!
you'll
I
be
like
fine.
warm fuzzy. I mean, I will take the other two because sometimes that fits the story. But yes, that makes me happy for Declan and his brother.
There's a feel good at the end.
Yes. So, yeah. Oh man, I love that. Because they do it. They go through a lot. They both do. And wow.
Yeah, we authors are really mean to our characters. If only they could come to life and like beat us up, they probably would.
Yeah, they would probably murder us in our sleep if they
Oh,
would.
yeah.
He's like,
Because Lord knows we murder them in their sleep. I mean,
yes.
Sorry, George Martin.
Yes, yeah. I mean, is there any other unique things you want to share about your stories before we come to a close?
Yeah, about a story. So again, the magic system is really unique in that, in a lot of stories, if you have, somebody you call a mage, they can cast a whole bunch of spells and do a bunch of cool stuff. And in this story, most people have one gift. They can do one thing, and it's very specific. Like you may be, if you're a farmer, you can make crops grow faster, and that's all you can do. Or if you're a healer, you can do healer stuff. And maybe if you're really cool, you can make fire pop out of your hand. I don't know. I'm making that part up.
Yeah.
But you can't do more than one. Like one person couldn't do all three of those things I just said. And so you see people with one gold band on their collar. Maybe once in a generation, twice in a generation, you'll have somebody born who has two gifts.
Oh.
They're really rare. And then like once in a millennium, maybe somebody has three. And there are a couple of players in the book that you learn about that were the three gift type. And they were really powerful. And hint, hint, Irina's one of them, and she's the bad guy.
Yeah.
But that, and you also learn why gifts are set up the way they are. You learn the magical backstory of that later on in the series. And that really, once you learn that, and I do some things with it, that becomes a game changer for the rest of the series, for the way it plays out and what the characters have to do after you learn that. Sorry, that really sounded mysterious and like not a lot of information. But the magic, I play with magic. And that's a really weird thing to say in a low magic series.
But it sounds creative because it is. Each person only has one. So you can only, they're in a way kind of limited, but not.
Yeah. So. And look, the series is all about the story and the characters. It's not about the magic. Magic just happens to be in the world. So and I wanted it to be that way. But it forces, if you're trying to do something sort of with a grand scale, you've got to cobble together all of the right people with all the right skills. And, if you're building a house, you do that with carpenters and plumbers and all that. Well, same thing magically now. And it requires a different level of coordination and cooperation and sort of society, all bringing their magic together to do things. And so if you sort of knock the legs out from under it in any way, you really shake up the magical makeup of the world. So there's just a lot that I get to play with that. And I'm really proud of the magic system. I think it ended up being much better than I thought when I first came up with it. So I would say that's the thing I'm enjoying the most with it.
Yes, that is amazing. Well, JD, go ahead and tell our listeners and viewers where they can find you and snag this book series.
Oh, finding me's easy. I'm anywhere you can stalk somebody. So if you go to Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok, Reddit, you name it, just pick a site and type in author JD Ruffin. That's my screen name everywhere. Author JD Ruffin. If you go to Amazon and just type in JD Ruffin books, it'll pull up my profile page. That has all my books. It's really simple to find. And my website is jdruffin.com because I'm very original, and that's what everything is.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being on the show. And guys, don't forget to hit the like button. And remember, it's always time to go indie now.
Chapter 6. Declan actually laughed. causing Orla and the old woman to stare in his direction. What you find funny, young man? This is insane. She's just a baby owl found in the woods back home. Besides, I'm not even gifted. Why would some ancient magical being choose me for anything? He ran the fingers of both hands through his long hair. The woman stared at Declan so long, he thought she might have fallen asleep with her eyes open. She seemed to stare through his chest. Orla mirrored her stare, making the quiet moments even more uncomfortable. What? What are you staring at? He finally asked, unable to take the silent scrutiny. Barnmate, you are a child, wandering in the wild with no clue where you need to go. You think of magic as a tool, some dead thing to use, but it's alive. Magic knows and sees and grows.